you for your support.
Fox News alert now as we learn new details on the scope of a potential U.S. military strike on the Assad regime in Syria. It's a brand new hour of America Live. I'm Allison Camerata in for Megyn Kelly. This as President Obama prepares to return home from the G20 summit in Russia, where world leaders failed to reach any firm agreement on how to respond to the alleged massacre of innocent people. But they have not agreed to back a potential U.S. strike without United Nations approval. Meanwhile, the Navy is keeping its options open in the region. In the Mediterranean Sea, there are 1 carrier strike group, 4 destroyers, and 1 amphibious ship. The destroyers each carrying an estimated 3 dozen or more Tomahawk missiles. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin is live at the Pentagon. She's been doing great reporting for us. What's the latest, Jennifer?
Hi, Allison. Well, Pentagon planners have been asked to revise their target list and strike plans more than 50 times, we're told. So to suggest that any final decisions have been made in terms of whether to use B-2 bombers or B-52 bombers for airstrikes would be misleading right now. As one defense official told me, our mission has not crept. The president also pushed back on these reports as well. He said that in terms of mission creep, here's what he said.
One military official told NBC News characterized it as mission creep. Can you respond to that report?
That report is inaccurate. I'm not going to comment on operational issues that are sourced by some military official.
The more time that goes on and the more Assad moves his assets around, target sets are being refined and updated, according to Pentagon officials, forcing Pentagon planners to alter and adapt the means of delivering a strike, suggesting that there could be some air assets involved, but not necessarily. These strikes would still be standoff missions, we're told, meaning it would be unlikely to have U.S. bombers over Syrian airspace. The president admitted that it's understandable people have concerns about a slippery slope.
What if we execute this strike and then he decides to use chemical weapons again? Do we strike again? Well, that's the definition of further entanglement. That's the definition of our becoming deeply involved in a war.
That was Senator Susan Collins. Pentagon officials are watching the Russian warships that are entering the Mediterranean, but are not overly concerned, we're told. According to one senior defense official, we at least see the Russians as rational actors. Allison?
Jennifer Griffin on top of all the latest developments for us. Thank you. Meanwhile, the refugee crisis in Syria and the region getting progressively worse, and the human toll is staggering. To date, more than 2 million people have crossed the borders, with many more expected to follow. An estimated 5,000 Syrians leaving their homes every day. More than half of the refugees are children under the age of 17. And another 4.2 million people are displaced within Syria. Meanwhile, they've been forced from their homes, but they are still inside that war-torn country. And now the Syrian people are considered the most displaced people on earth. Well, the U.S. State Department now ordering some Americans to get out of countries in the Middle East where they may be at risk. U.S. authorities citing unspecified possible threats, and they're evacuating non-emergency personnel and family members from Lebanon and southeast Turkey, 2 nations, of course, bordering the war-torn Syria. Fox's Leland Bittert is live in our Middle East bureau in Jerusalem with more. Hi, Leland.
Hi, Ali. This all comes down to trying to limit the number of targets that either Syria or Iran could retaliate against. Beirut could be on the very top of that list. And the U.S. has a bloody history inside Beirut. Remember that back in the 1980s, the man who would go on to be one of the leaders of Hezbollah was behind the bombings, not only at the U.S. Embassy, but also the U.S. Marine barracks there inside of Beirut. And that has become a place that there's large thought that the Iranians could order retaliation. The Syrians could use some of their expertise to bring about a retaliatory strike against U.S. interests. Also there in southern Lebanon is, of course, Hezbollah, the Iranian-financed militant group heavily involved in the Syrian civil war on the side of President Bashar Assad, and then also has the capability of retaliating down in the south against Israel, a key U.S. ally here. This all comes as every day that goes by that the U.S. doesn't strike is one more day that the Iranians and the Syrians have a better idea of coming up about how they would want to retaliate. At the same time, we're learning more and more about the Syrian rebels who we may end up helping with an airstrike against President Assad. This video just came out from the New York Times. We can only show you a still picture because it is just that graphic, but it shows Syrian rebels executing Syrian soldiers that they have captured. The Syrian soldiers are the men laying down there without their shirts on. Later in the video, they are then shot. And this is one of just a number of videos that have surfaced of the rebels not only becoming very allied with the jihadist fronts, the al-Nusra Front, the al-Qaeda syndicate groups there inside of Syria, but also committing atrocities on their own, torturing prisoners, those kinds of things. Clearly, folks, that would not be really all that advantageous for the United States if they took over Syria and or took over some of Syria's more advanced weapon systems. It's becoming a growing problem, Ali, as the Pentagon is learning more about these people inside of Syria who are the rebels. It's one thing to try to figure out who are the good guys, then the problem becomes figuring out if there are any good guys to get behind if the United States decides to then try to arm rebels, equip rebels, and continue to help them moving forward. Back to you.
Oh, it's so true. The scenario is so complicated, and that video is gruesome. Thanks for explaining it to us, Leland. Meanwhile, coming up, we will examine the potential options for a military strike on Syria with a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army. And this Sunday, be sure to tune in to Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace covering both sides of the Syria debate. He'll speak with White House Chief of Staff Dennis McDonough and Republican Kentucky Senator Rand Paul, an influential member of the Foreign Relations Committee who opposes military action in Syria.